A billionaire's carefully crafted public image has just been shattered by a single dinner reservation. Authorities weren't called. No crime was committed. No paparazzi chased anyone through the streets of Chicago. Yet, by the end of one quiet evening inside one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a relationship that had taken nearly a year to build was on the verge of collapse. Witnesses remember seeing a successful businessman smiling across the table from a woman who wasn't the one everyone believed he loved. What no one inside that restaurant realized was that another woman, the one waiting faithfully for him at home, was only minutes away from discovering a truth that would change all three of their lives forever. At first glance, it looked like another billionaire cheating on the woman who trusted him. But as investigators often say, first impressions rarely tell the whole story. Because this wasn't simply a story about an affair. It wasn't even a story about a mistress. It was a story about a little boy who watched his family fall apart in complete silence. A successful man who believed hiding the truth was kinder than telling it. And a woman who had spent years learning that love without honesty is only an illusion. Before tonight is over, you'll discover why one simple lie about dinner became the most expensive mistake a billionaire ever made. Not because it cost him money, but because it nearly cost him the only person who ever loved him for who he was instead of what he owned. So, here's a question for you. If the person you trusted more than anyone suddenly cancelled dinner because of an urgent business meeting, but you later found them sharing laughter with someone else, would you walk away immediately? Or would you stay long enough to hear the truth? Take a moment to tell us what you would do in the comments before we begin. Your perspective could help someone else facing a similar situation. And if you're new to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, welcome. This channel is where unforgettable love stories meet powerful life lessons. Stories that remind us that trust, forgiveness, and honesty are choices we make every single day. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join our growing family, because today's journey is one you won't want to miss. Now, let's go back 8 months, long before the secret dinner, long before the heartbreak, long before anyone whispered the word, mistress. Back to a rainy evening when a 12-year-old boy stood silently outside his family's dining room, watching a moment that would quietly shape every decision he made about love for the rest of his life. Because sometimes, the most dangerous lie isn't the one we tell someone else. It's the one we've been telling ourselves for years. Rain had a way of making Chicago feel quieter than it really was. On the evening of October 14th, 26 years earlier, thick grey clouds hung low over the city while steady rain tapped against the large windows of the Caldwell family home. Expensive houses lined the quiet street, their warm lights glowing through the darkness. To anyone driving past, the Caldwell residence looked perfect, a beautiful home owned by one of Chicago's most respected businessmen. Behind those walls, however, perfection was only another carefully maintained illusion. 12-year-old Ethan Caldwell stood at the upstairs hallway window, watching his father's black luxury sedan pull into the driveway. His heart lifted. "Dad's home," he whispered. He hurried down the staircase 2 steps at a time, his sock-covered feet sliding slightly across the polished wooden floor before he caught himself on the banister. Friday nights were supposed to be family nights. His mother always cooked Ethan's favorite meal, roast chicken with mashed potatoes, buttery corn, and homemade rolls. His father would usually arrive just before dinner, loosen his tie, kiss his wife on the forehead, and spend the evening talking about business while Ethan listened with wide-eyed admiration. To Ethan, his father wasn't just successful. He was a hero. Richard Caldwell had built one of Chicago's fastest-growing investment firms from almost nothing. Newspapers admired him. Business magazines praised him. Employees respected him. At school, teachers smiled whenever they recognized Ethan's last name. "Your father is an incredible businessman," they often said. Every compliment filled Ethan with pride. He wanted to become exactly like him. As the front door opened, cold air drifted into the foyer. "Evening," Richard called, shaking rain from his umbrella. His voice sounded tired. Normal, nothing unusual. Ethan ran toward him. "Dad!" Richard smiled as Ethan wrapped him in a hug. "Easy there, champ. I've been waiting all day." "I know." Richard gently ruffled his son's hair. "How was school?" "I got an A on my history test." "You did?" Ethan nodded proudly. "I told everyone I'd show you." "That's my boy." For a moment, everything felt exactly the way it always had. Safe, comfortable, predictable. Then Ethan noticed something strange. His mother had stopped walking. She stood only a few feet away from them, holding a folded kitchen towel in her hands. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't speaking. She was simply looking at Richard, not at his face, not into his eyes. At his white dress shirt, Richard followed her gaze. Almost instinctively, his hand moved toward the collar of his shirt. There, Barely visible beneath the soft yellow light hanging above the foyer was a faint red smudge. Lipstick. Ethan didn't understand what it meant. He only knew his mother's expression had changed. Not into anger. Something much quieter, much sadder. For several long seconds, nobody said anything. The silence felt heavy enough to hear. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. Traffic was terrible. His mother blinked. "I'll finish setting the table." That was all she said. No questions, no accusations, no tears. She simply turned around and walked back toward the dining room. Richard slowly removed his suit jacket before looking down at Ethan. "Go wash your hands, buddy." "Aren't you coming?" "In a minute." "Okay." Ethan obeyed, but something inside him felt different. Children don't always understand adult problems. They simply recognize when the air inside a room changes. And tonight, everything felt colder. Dinner began 5 minutes later. The table looked beautiful. Candles burned softly. The food smelled wonderful. His mother had prepared everything perfectly. She smiled whenever Ethan spoke. She passed dishes politely. She asked Richard about work. She laughed once or twice. To anyone watching through the window, they looked like the perfect American family. Only Ethan noticed the spaces between the words. His parents weren't talking. They were performing. Every sentence sounded rehearsed. Every smile ended too quickly. Every glance avoided the truth, sitting silently at the center of the table. Richard complimented the food. "It tastes wonderful." "Thank you," his mother replied. Ethan looked between them. Normally his father would reach across the table and squeeze his mother's hand. Tonight, their hands never came close. He watched his mother refill everyone's water glasses. When she leaned toward Richard, she briefly closed her eyes, almost as if gathering strength. She smelled his shirt, very subtly, so subtly that Richard probably didn't even notice. Then she straightened herself, still saying nothing. Ethan felt confused. Was something wrong? Had his parents argued? Had Dad forgotten an anniversary? He wanted to ask, but something told him not to. So he ate quietly. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, forks gently tapped against porcelain plates. The silence between each sound seemed endless. After dinner, Richard excused himself to his home office. "I have a few emails to answer." His mother nodded. "I'll clean up." "I'll help," Ethan offered. She smiled. "I'd love that." Together, they carried dishes into the kitchen. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Warm water filled the sink. Soap bubbles floated across the surface. Ethan dried each plate carefully before handing it back to his mother. Finally, he couldn't hold the question any longer. "Mom?" She looked up. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you and Dad mad at each other?" Her hands stopped moving, just for a second. Then she forced another gentle smile. "No. You seem sad." "I'm just tired." "You sure?" She reached over and softly touched his cheek. "Sometimes adults carry worries children aren't meant to carry. But I can help." "I know you can." She smiled again. "And one day you'll make someone very happy." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "When you love someone." She paused, searching for the right words. "Never let fear convince you that hiding the truth protects the people you love." Ethan stared at her. He didn't fully understand. Not yet. She kissed his forehead. "Go finish your homework." "Okay." As Ethan walked toward the hallway, he glanced back. His mother stood alone at the kitchen sink. She believed no one was watching. Slowly, almost silently, a single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away before anyone else could ever see it. But Ethan saw, and that quiet tear became one of the memories he would carry for the rest of his life. Years later, he would forget birthdays. He would forget business meetings. He would forget the names of people who came and went. But he would never forget that tear. Because in that moment, without realizing it, a 12-year-old boy made himself a promise. "When I grow up, I'll never make the woman I love cry like that." He believed that promise would protect his future. He had no idea that keeping it would prove far more difficult than making it. 26 years later, the Chicago skyline shimmered beneath the early morning sun, its glass towers catching streaks of gold as the city slowly came alive. Thousands of people hurried toward trains, coffee shops opened their doors, and traffic flowed steadily through downtown streets. High above it all, on the top floor of Caldwell Global Holdings, Ethan Caldwell stood alone in his corner office. At 38, he had become everything the business world admired. He was one of America's youngest self-made billionaires. Financial magazines praised his discipline. Business podcasts called him a visionary. Universities invited him to speak about leadership. Employees respected him because he knew the names of receptionists as easily as he knew board members. To the public, Ethan Caldwell represented success. To himself, he represented control. Control over his emotions. Control over his schedule. Control over every decision that shaped his life. Everything except the memories he couldn't outrun. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a steaming cup of black coffee warming his hands. Rain wasn't falling today. Yet for reasons he couldn't explain, rainy mornings always reminded him of that night from childhood. His mother's quiet smile. His father's stained shirt. The silence around the dinner table. The tear she thought nobody had seen. Some memories never aged. They simply waited. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His executive assistant, Daniel Harper, stepped inside carrying a leather folder. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." "Morning, Daniel. You've got a full schedule." "I figured." Daniel opened the folder. Board meeting at 9. Investment conference call at 11. Lunch with the healthcare acquisition team. A charity gala planning session this afternoon. And dinner with Ms. Brooks at 7. For the first time that morning, Ethan smiled. "Don't let me miss that one." Daniel laughed. "I've noticed you never do." After several years of working together, Daniel had witnessed Ethan cancel billion-dollar meetings without hesitation if they conflicted with plans involving Maya Brooks. It wasn't because Ethan lacked ambition. It was because Maya reminded him there was more to life than building companies. When Daniel left the office, Ethan looked toward the framed photograph sitting beside his computer. It had been taken the previous autumn. He and Maya were standing on the shore of Lake Michigan during sunset. Neither wore expensive clothing. Neither looked toward the camera. They were laughing about something neither of them could remember now. It remained Ethan's favorite photograph, not because it looked perfect, because it felt honest. He picked it up gently. "I'll see you tonight," he murmured. Then he returned it to his desk. Across the city, Maya Brooks stood inside a renovated warehouse that was slowly becoming one of Chicago's most anticipated community arts centers. Construction helmets rested on nearby tables, while architects, engineers, and contractors reviewed final blueprints. Maya moved confidently among them. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her calm confidence naturally drew people's attention. At 34, Maya had built a reputation as one of the city's most respected architects. She believed buildings should do more than impress people. They should make people feel welcome. That philosophy reflected her personality as well. She believed relationships should feel like home. Not performance. Not competition. Home. "Morning, Maya." Her project manager, Elena, walked beside her carrying rolled construction plans. "Morning." The inspection passed. "Perfect. The mayor's office loved your presentation." "That's good news." Elena smiled. "You've earned a celebration." Maya laughed. "I've already got one planned." "Oh?" "Dinner tonight." "With Ethan?" Maya nodded. "He promised we'd finally have one evening without business interruptions." Elena grinned knowingly. "He keeps that promise better than most CEOs. He really does." There wasn't hesitation in Maya's voice. There wasn't doubt. She trusted Ethan completely. Not because he showered her with expensive gifts. In fact, she'd often teased him for trying. She trusted him because he remembered ordinary things. He knew how she liked her coffee. He remembered the anniversary of her grandmother's passing. He listened when she talked. He showed up when he said he would. After her broken engagement years earlier, those little things mattered more than diamonds ever could. She had learned that grand romantic gestures were easy. Consistency was rare. And Ethan had always been consistent. At least, that's what she believed. That afternoon, Ethan left the office earlier than usual. He wanted to surprise Maya. Passing a small florist near Millennium Park, he stopped the car. Inside, fresh flowers filled the air with a gentle fragrance. A young employee approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for white lilies." "They're beautiful." "They're her favorite." The employee smiled. "You remembered." "I try." As the bouquet was wrapped, Ethan checked his watch. 6 hours until dinner. Plenty of time. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The smile disappeared. Claire. One new message. He stared at the notification without opening it. For several long seconds, he simply held the phone. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. The flowers suddenly felt heavier. Nearly 6 months earlier, Claire Reynolds had entered Ethan's life during a business conference in New York. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't searching for his money. She was a corporate communications consultant hired to help one of Caldwell Global's partner companies during a merger. Smart. Funny. Easy to talk to. At first, their conversations stayed professional, then personal, then emotionally complicated. It had happened gradually. One late dinner after a conference. Another conversation after a delayed flight. A weekend business retreat. Neither of them had intended for boundaries to blur, but they had. By the time Ethan realized what was happening, walking away had become more difficult than he expected. Not because he loved Claire. Deep inside he knew he didn't. He loved Maya. He had never stopped loving Maya. His mistake wasn't choosing between two women. His mistake was avoiding one painful conversation after another. Every week he told himself the same thing. I'll end it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. And every delay required another lie. Not because he wanted to deceive Maya. Because he feared becoming the man he had promised himself he would never become. Ironically, that fear pushed him closer to exactly that man. The phone vibrated again. Another message from Claire. Are we still meeting Friday? Ethan closed his eyes. He hadn't answered her last 3 messages. He knew this couldn't continue. He also knew postponing the conversation would only make things worse. Yet every time he imagined hurting someone, he froze. His mother's words echoed through his memory. Never let fear convince you that hiding the truth protects the people you love. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. I know, he whispered to himself. I know. But knowing the right thing and doing it weren't always the same. The city traffic crawled forward. A few minutes later, his phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Claire. It was Maya. He answered immediately. Hi. Hey, Maya said warmly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Never. I was just thinking about tonight. So was I. I can't wait. He smiled, despite the knot forming inside his chest. Me neither. You sound tired. Busy day. Then tonight's exactly what you need. I think you're right. She laughed softly. I'll meet you at 7. I'll be there. I know you will. Those 4 simple words settled heavily over him. I know you will. Trust. Pure. Complete. The kind of trust that isn't demanded. It's earned. Ethan ended the call and rested his forehead against the steering wheel for just a moment. Outside, impatient drivers honked as traffic began moving again. Inside the car, the silence felt painfully familiar. For the first time in years, he realized something that sent a chill through him. His father hadn't become the man Ethan despised in a single day. He had become that man, one postponed conversation at a time. One excuse. One hidden message. One, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Ethan started the engine again, unaware that tomorrow was running out. And somewhere across the city, Maya smiled as she imagined the quiet dinner they would share that evening, never suspecting that before the week was over, one simple promise about dinner would become the beginning of the greatest test their love had ever faced. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Do you believe Ethan is already becoming the very man he promised he would never be? Or do you think he still has a chance to make things right before it's too late? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and I'd love to hear what you think. If this story has already touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable love story filled with real-life lessons about trust, relationships, and second chances. Now, let's continue, because one unanswered message is about to change everything. Some people fall in love because of one unforgettable moment. Maya Brooks believed real love happened differently. It happened in ordinary moments that most people never noticed. It happened when someone remembered how you took your coffee after you mentioned it only once. It happened when they showed up exactly when they said they would. It happened when they listened without checking their phone. It happened in consistency. Looking back, Maya couldn't remember the exact moment she fell in love with Ethan Caldwell. She remembered hundreds of little moments instead. The first time they met had been almost 18 months earlier at a charity fundraiser benefiting affordable housing initiatives across Chicago. As the lead architect on one of the city's largest community redevelopment projects, Maya had attended reluctantly. Networking events weren't her favorite way to spend a Friday evening, but her firm encouraged every senior architect to participate. The ballroom inside the historic hotel sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians, developers, business executives, and non-profit leaders moved from conversation to conversation with practiced smiles. Maya had barely finished introducing herself to a city council member when someone accidentally bumped into her. I'm so sorry. She turned. A tall man in a navy suit steadied the glass of sparkling water she was holding before it spilled onto her dress. That was my fault. His voice was calm, genuine. There wasn't the rushed politeness people often used before moving on. Maya smiled. No damage done. I should have been paying attention. I think we were both trying to escape the same conversation. He laughed softly. I was. She noticed something unexpected. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't scanning the room for someone more important. He wasn't boasting about business. He was simply present. I'm Ethan. Maya, For several seconds, neither of them said anything. Oddly, the silence wasn't awkward. It felt comfortable. "So," Ethan finally asked, "what brings you here?" "I'm an architect." His eyebrows lifted. "That explains why you spent the last 10 minutes staring at the ceiling." She laughed. "You noticed? You weren't looking at the people. You were studying the building." "I always study buildings. And the chandeliers are beautiful. The marble is timeless. But the lighting around the entrance makes the room feel colder than it should." Ethan glanced toward the entrance. "You figured all that out in 10 minutes?" "I figured it out in 2. He smiled. "I think I'd like seeing the world through your eyes." It was a simple sentence. Not rehearsed, not flirtatious, just honest curiosity. That conversation lasted nearly 40 minutes. They talked about neighborhoods instead of net worth, family traditions instead of financial markets, favorite books, favorite cities, the best places in Chicago to watch the sunrise. When Maya finally left that evening, she realized something unusual. For the first time in years, she had spent nearly an hour talking to a man who never once mentioned what he owned. She didn't learn Ethan was a billionaire until she searched his name the following afternoon. Her first reaction had been disbelief. Her second had been concern. She had dated successful men before. One had even proposed. Success had never been the problem. Character had. Nearly 4 years before meeting Ethan, Maya had been engaged to a man named Marcus. They had planned a spring wedding in Atlanta. The invitations had been mailed. The venue had been reserved. Family members had already booked flights. From the outside, their future looked certain. Then, one quiet Tuesday evening, everything changed. Marcus sat across from her at their apartment dining table. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I need to tell you something." She remembered every detail of that night. The untouched pasta growing cold. The rain tapping gently against the balcony door. The strange feeling in her stomach before he even spoke. "I've been seeing someone else." 3 seconds. That was how long it took for the future she imagined to disappear. Not because he admitted cheating. Because he admitted it had been happening for nearly a year. Nearly a year. Every anniversary. Every vacation. Every promise. Every "I love you." Built alongside another life she never knew existed. Later, when friends asked what hurt the most, Maya surprised herself with the answer. It wasn't that he loved someone else. It was discovering he'd looked me in the eyes every day while hiding the truth. She returned the engagement ring the next morning. She cancelled the wedding herself. Then she accepted a promotion that brought her to Chicago. She wasn't running away. She was choosing a place where every street didn't remind her of broken promises. Healing took time. Long walks along the lakefront. Late nights designing buildings. Sunday dinners with new friends. Learning to enjoy her own company again. By the time Ethan entered her life, Maya had made one quiet promise to herself. She would never ignore dishonesty simply because love made the truth uncomfortable. One Saturday morning, nearly a year into their relationship, Ethan arrived at Maya's apartment carrying a paper bag from the neighborhood bakery. "You remembered," Maya said, smiling as she opened the door. "Cinnamon rolls. And blueberry muffins. Only because they were almost sold out. You got here before 8, didn't you?" "I may have." She laughed. "You know, most billionaires probably spend Saturday mornings sleeping. Most billionaires probably haven't tasted these cinnamon rolls." They carried breakfast to her small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. The city hadn't fully awakened yet. Cyclists passed below. A dog chased pigeons across the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, church bells rang softly. "This," Ethan said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, "is my favorite part of the week." "Breakfast? You?" She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "That was smooth." "It wasn't supposed to be. It sounded rehearsed." "I've never rehearsed anything with you." She believed him, because Ethan rarely spoke in dramatic declarations. Instead, he noticed when she looked tired. He brought soup when she caught the flu. He remembered her mother's birthday. He texted before every important presentation. His love lived in ordinary acts of care. And those ordinary acts slowly rebuilt a trust Maya once believed she had lost forever. Neither of them realized that trust is much easier to build than it is to repair. Sometimes, it takes years to earn, and only one decision to begin losing. As they finished breakfast, Ethan's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the screen. For the briefest moment, something changed in his expression. Not fear, not panic, just hesitation. He turned the phone face down. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'll call them back later." Maya nodded without another thought. At the time, it felt like an insignificant moment. The kind of moment couples experience every day. Neither of them knew that one unanswered call was the first small thread in a tapestry of choices that would soon test everything they believed about love, honesty, and trust. Monday mornings at Caldwell Global Holdings always moved with military precision. By 8 o'clock, the elevators carried executives to the upper floors. Assistants hurried through glass corridors with tablets in hand, and conference rooms filled with conversations about acquisitions, quarterly projections, and international partnerships. Ethan Caldwell had built his company on one simple principle. Preparation eliminated panic. He arrived before nearly everyone else, reviewed every agenda personally, and never expected from his employees what he wasn't willing to do himself. That consistency had earned him something money couldn't buy: respect. As he stepped off the private elevator, several employees greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." "Morning. Congratulations on yesterday's interview." "Thank you." He stopped briefly at the reception desk. "How's your son doing after his soccer tournament, Melissa?" The receptionist looked pleasantly surprised. "He scored his first goal." Ethan smiled. "I knew he would. Tell him congratulations." Small moments like that explained why employees stayed with Caldwell Global for years. He remembered people, not because he forced himself to, because he genuinely cared. Yet even people who seemed emotionally available could hide entire conversations inside themselves. At 10 that morning, Ethan entered the executive conference room for a strategy meeting with representatives from one of the company's newest consulting partners. The merger project had been underway for several months and required weekly coordination between both organizations. As executives settled into their seats, the conference room door opened one final time. A woman stepped inside carrying a leather portfolio. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, her chestnut brown hair falling in soft waves over one shoulder. Confident, professional, composed. "Sorry I'm a minute late," she said. The elevator decided to stop on every floor. Several people laughed. Ethan offered a polite nod. "Good morning." "Morning, Ethan." The exchange lasted only seconds. Nothing about it appeared unusual. To everyone else in the room, she was simply another consultant assigned to the project. Her name was Claire Reynolds, one of the most respected corporate communication specialists in Chicago. Over the next 2 hours, Claire presented a communication strategy designed to reassure employees during the merger. She spoke clearly, confidently, never once trying to dominate the room. Ethan listened carefully, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that sharpened the discussion. When the meeting ended, executives slowly filtered into the hallway. Claire gathered her notes. "Nice presentation," Ethan said. "Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment. You earned it." She smiled. "Thank you." A brief silence settled between them, professional, comfortable. Then Ethan checked his watch. "I've got another meeting." "So do I." "Take care." "You too." They walked in opposite directions. Anyone watching would have seen nothing remarkable, just two professionals heading to their next appointments. Later that afternoon, Maya stood inside the nearly completed Community Arts Center, watching sunlight stream through the enormous windows she had fought to include in the original design. Children would eventually fill these halls. Artists would display their work here. Families would gather for concerts and neighborhood events. "Buildings," she often said, "should make people feel seen." "Still admiring your masterpiece?" Elena joined her near the entrance. "I'm imagining opening day." "It finally feels real." "It does." Elena folded her arms. "So?" Maya smiled knowingly. "So? How serious are things with Ethan?" Maya looked toward the sunlight stretching across the polished floor. "Serious enough that I stopped imagining life without him." Elena studied her friend's face. "You trust him?" "I do. Completely?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She had learned long ago that absolute certainty belonged only in fairy tales. But trust was different. "It isn't about believing someone is perfect," she said quietly. "It's believing they'll tell you the truth, even when it's difficult." Elena nodded slowly. "That's a good definition." Maya laughed. "I didn't invent it." "Who did?" "My grandmother." She remembered those words as clearly as if she had heard them yesterday. "Baby, love isn't measured by how often someone says, 'I love you.' It's measured by whether you can rest peacefully when they're not standing beside you." For almost a year, that peace had come easily with Ethan. That evening, Ethan arrived at Maya's apartment carrying groceries instead of flowers. She raised an eyebrow. "Planning to cook?" "I'm attempting to." "Those are two very different things." "I watched 3 videos." "Oh, this should be interesting." They laughed together as they unpacked ingredients across the kitchen counter. Fresh basil, cherry tomatoes, garlic, Parmesan cheese, pasta, nothing extravagant. Just dinner. Maya tied an apron around her waist. You chop. I thought billionaires hired people to chop. They probably do. And you? I like earning my dinner. She handed him a cutting board. We'll see if your knife skills survive inspection. For the next hour, they worked side by side, talking about everything except work. A funny client, a movie they wanted to see, vacation ideas, the neighborhood bakery. The conversation flowed as naturally as the simmering sauce on the stove. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, only two people enjoying the comfort of each other's company. When dinner was finally ready, they carried their plates to the small dining table beside the window. Outside, evening lights reflected across the wet streets below. Ethan looked around the apartment. I've eaten in restaurants that cost more than some cars. And? He smiled. I'd choose this every time. She reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. I hope that never changes. He looked into her eyes. So do I. For one quiet moment, he meant every word. Then his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket hanging over the chair. The vibration was faint, barely noticeable. He didn't move. It buzzed again. Maya glanced toward the jacket. You should probably get that. It can wait. You sure? He smiled reassuringly. I'm exactly where I want to be. She believed him, because she had no reason not to. The phone stopped vibrating. The room returned to silence. They finished dinner, talking about nothing important. Neither realized that sometimes the most important moments in a relationship are the ordinary evenings we assume will always be there. Outside, the rain began falling softly against the windows. Inside, Ethan watched the droplets race down the glass. For just an instant, he was 12 years old again. Sitting at another dinner table, listening to another storm. The memory disappeared as quickly as it had come, but the uneasy feeling remained. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that avoiding difficult conversations never made them disappear. It only postponed the moment they demanded to be heard, and without realizing it, that moment was drawing closer with every passing day. By Thursday evening, Chicago had settled into one of those unusually peaceful autumn nights when the city seemed to breathe a little slower. Golden leaves drifted along Michigan Avenue as office workers hurried toward restaurants, theaters, and train stations. The crisp air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby street vendor, and the skyline glowed against the fading light. Inside Caldwell Global Holdings, however, Ethan Caldwell was still working. His office lights remained on long after most employees had gone home. A stack of reports sat unopened on his desk. His laptop displayed tomorrow's schedule, but his attention wasn't on either of them. It was on the small leather notebook resting beside his keyboard. Whenever a difficult decision weighed on him, Ethan wrote instead of spoke. He flipped to a blank page. At the top, he wrote only 3 words. Tell the truth. He stared at them for nearly a minute. Then he closed the notebook, without writing anything else. His phone buzzed. Daniel, his executive assistant, stepped into the office after a gentle knock. Still here? For now? Daniel handed him tomorrow's itinerary. You've got breakfast with the investment committee, a site visit after lunch, and dinner at 7. Ethan nodded. Dinner stays. It always does. Daniel hesitated before turning toward the door. Can I ask you something? Ethan looked up. Since when do you ask permission? Daniel smiled faintly. Fair enough. He folded his hands behind his back. You've seemed distracted lately. I'm just busy. You've been busy every day since I've worked for you. This feels different. Ethan leaned back in his chair. What makes you say that? You've started rereading emails before sending them. You've cancelled 2 workouts. You've forgotten your coffee twice. Ethan chuckled. I didn't realize I was being observed. I observe everyone. It keeps this place running. The smile slowly disappeared from Daniel's face. If something's wrong, you don't have to carry it alone. For several seconds, Ethan considered saying something, anything. Instead, he simply nodded. I appreciate that. Daniel knew that answer. It meant the conversation was over. Good night, Ethan. Good night. The office fell silent again. Ethan picked up the notebook once more. Tell the truth. The words somehow looked heavier than they had 5 minutes earlier. Across the city, Maya stood inside her apartment, carefully arranging fresh white lilies in a glass vase. She smiled as she trimmed the stems. White lilies had always reminded her of her grandmother. Simple, elegant, honest. Her phone rang. The screen displayed Grandma Evelyn. Maya answered immediately. Hi, Grandma. My favorite architect. You say that because I'm your only architect. I said what I said. Maya laughed. How are you feeling? Oh, these old knees still complain every morning. They've been complaining since I was 12. And they'll probably keep complaining until I'm 95. They both laughed. After talking about family, church, and neighbors back in Atlanta, Grandma Evelyn suddenly asked, "How's that young man?" "Ethan?" "Mm-hmm. He's good." "Still making you smile?" "He does." "Does he bring you peace?" The question caught Maya off guard. "Peace?" "Yes. You'd be surprised how many people can bring excitement. But peace. Peace is rare." Maya looked toward the empty chair across her dining table. "He brings me peace." Grandma Evelyn remained quiet for a moment. "Then don't ever take that for granted." "I won't. And remember." "What?" "Trust grows slowly, but it can disappear faster than people imagine." Maya smiled. "You're giving relationship advice again." "I'm giving life advice. They're usually the same thing." The following afternoon, Ethan left work earlier than usual. For once, he intended to keep tomorrow evening completely free. No meetings, no investors, no interruptions. He wanted one uninterrupted dinner with Maya. He stopped outside a small jewelry store he had passed dozens of times but never entered. The display window featured elegant necklaces, bracelets, and rings. He wasn't shopping for an engagement ring. Not yet. But he wanted something meaningful. Inside, an elderly jeweler greeted him warmly. "Looking for something special?" "I hope so." "For a birthday?" "No." "Anniversary?" "No." The jeweler smiled knowingly. Sometimes the best gifts don't need an occasion. Ethan nodded. "I think you're right." After several minutes, he chose a delicate gold necklace with a tiny compass pendant. "It's beautiful," the jeweler said, while placing it inside a velvet box. "Do you know why I like this one?" Ethan shook his head. "A compass doesn't promise an easy journey. It simply helps people find their way." Those words lingered in Ethan's mind long after he left the store. As evening settled over Chicago, Ethan arrived home carrying the small gift box. He placed it on the kitchen counter and loosened his tie. The apartment felt unusually quiet. He poured himself a glass of water before walking toward the large windows overlooking the city. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He frowned. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "Hello?" There was silence. Then a familiar female voice spoke quietly. "Ethan." He closed his eyes, not because he was surprised, because he had known this call would come eventually. "We need to talk." He looked out over the glowing city lights. His reflection stared back at him through the glass. For the first time in many months, he realized that every conversation he had postponed was beginning to arrive all at once. And tomorrow, one dinner would force him to choose whether honesty was something he merely believed in, or something he was finally willing to live by. Friday arrived with clear skies over Chicago. For Maya Brooks, it felt like the perfect way to end an exhausting week. She had wrapped up the final presentation for the Community Arts Center that afternoon, and for the first time in days she wasn't thinking about blueprints, deadlines, or construction schedules. She was thinking about dinner, not because of the restaurant, not because of the food, because uninterrupted evenings with Ethan had become increasingly rare. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, deciding between two dresses. One was elegant and black. The other was a deep emerald green Ethan had once quietly admired. "You always look beautiful in green," he had told her months earlier while they were walking along the Chicago River. It hadn't sounded like a compliment. It had sounded like an observation. She smiled to herself and reached for the green dress. Sometimes, love lived inside remembered sentences. Across town, Ethan adjusted his tie as he stepped out of a board meeting. His phone had already buzzed 6 times. He didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. He walked into his office, closed the door, and finally answered. "Hello?" Claire's voice was calm. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I've been in meetings." "I know." A long silence followed. Then she spoke again. "Are we still meeting tonight?" Ethan closed his eyes. This was the conversation he had postponed for months. "No." The word came quietly. "I'm not coming." Another silence. Longer, this time. "I think we both know why." Claire didn't sound angry, only tired. "I wasn't asking because I wanted another dinner." "You weren't?" "No." She took a slow breath. "I wanted to know if you were finally going to stop avoiding this." Ethan leaned against his desk. "I'm sorry." "You've apologized before." "I know. You always say you'll explain everything." "I know. And then you disappear." He looked toward the window overlooking the city. "I never wanted to hurt you. I believe that. But intention doesn't erase consequence." Her words landed harder than she realized. "I need to see you," she continued. "One last time. There isn't anything left to say. There is for me. He hesitated, only for a moment. Then, he made the decision that would haunt him. 30 minutes. I'll meet you at Bellissimo. Bellissimo, the same restaurant where Maya was expecting him. As soon as the call ended, Ethan sat down heavily in his chair. What are you doing? He whispered to himself. He reached for his phone. Opened Maya's contact. His thumb hovered over the screen. He could still tell her the truth. He could still explain. Instead, he typed a different message. I'm so sorry. An investor from New York landed unexpectedly. I have to handle an emergency meeting tonight. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? He stared at the message. Every instinct told him not to send it. His mother's voice echoed from years ago. Never let fear convince you that hiding the truth protects the people you love. His thumb trembled. Then, he pressed send. One lie. Just one. He convinced himself it would spare everyone unnecessary pain. Maya's phone vibrated just as she finished fastening the necklace Ethan had given her months earlier. She smiled when she saw his name. The smile slowly faded as she read the message. She read it again. Then, a third time. Investor, emergency. She sighed, softly. Disappointment flickered across her face, but not anger. Ethan had rarely cancelled plans. When he did, there was usually a good reason. She picked up the phone. Of course. I hope everything goes well. We'll have dinner tomorrow instead. A moment later, his reply arrived. Thank you for understanding. She set the phone down. Something felt off. Not wrong. Just unfamiliar. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because Ethan usually called instead of texting when plans changed. Maybe it was because the message felt unusually formal. Or maybe it was simply the lingering memory of Grandma Evelyn's words. Trust grows slowly, but it can disappear faster than people imagine. Maya shook the thought away. No, she whispered. He's probably just busy. She changed back into comfortable clothes and decided not to waste the evening. A walk downtown might clear her mind. 45 minutes later, Bellissimo restaurant glowed beneath warm golden lights. Soft piano music drifted through the dining room as couples celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and ordinary Fridays made special by shared conversation. Ethan arrived first. He stood near the entrance for several moments, clearly debating whether to leave. Then Claire walked in. She wore a simple navy dress and no jewelry except a silver watch. When she saw Ethan, she didn't smile. You came. I said I would. A bittersweet laugh escaped her. Eventually, they were shown to a quiet table near the windows. Neither reached for the menu. Neither seemed interested in dinner. Claire looked at him for a long moment before speaking. I don't want another promise. You shouldn't. I don't want another apology either. He nodded slowly. You deserve better. I do. She swallowed hard. But so does the woman you're lying to. Ethan lowered his eyes. Claire continued quietly. I've known about Maya for months. His head lifted in surprise. You knew? I knew enough. I also knew every time you postponed ending this, you were hurting both of us. The waiter approached. Would you like a few more minutes? Yes, Claire answered gently. After he walked away, she looked back at Ethan. This isn't really our last dinner. He frowned. No? It's your last chance to decide what kind of man you want to be. Outside the restaurant windows, the evening crowds continued moving through downtown Chicago. A few blocks away, Maya walked slowly beneath the city lights, unaware that every step was bringing her closer to Bellissimo. Neither Ethan nor Claire noticed her. Not yet. But fate, unlike fear, rarely waits for the perfect moment. Outside Bellissimo, the evening air carried the comforting scent of fresh bread, roasted garlic, and autumn rain. Maya slowed her pace as she reached the corner. She hadn't planned on coming here. After Ethan cancelled dinner, she had wandered downtown hoping the cool night air would clear the strange heaviness she couldn't explain. Then she remembered. Bellissimo sold the lemon mascarpone cheesecake Ethan loved. She smiled. I'll surprise him tomorrow, she thought. She stepped inside. The hostess greeted her warmly. Good evening. Welcome to Bellissimo. Hi. I'm actually just here for dessert. Our bakery counter is just this way. Thank you. Maya followed the hostess through the softly lit dining room. Candles flickered on every table. Couples leaned toward one another in quiet conversation. Soft piano music floated through the restaurant. It felt peaceful, comfortable, ordinary. Then, she heard a laugh. Not a loud laugh. Not an unusual laugh. A familiar one. Her steps slowed. Her heart didn't race. Not yet. She turned her head almost instinctively. Across the dining room, near the windows overlooking Michigan Avenue, sat Ethan. For a brief second, relief washed over her. The investor meeting must be here, she thought. Then she noticed there were no laptops, no presentation folders, no business associates, just Ethan. And a woman she had never seen before. The woman wasn't leaning across the table. She wasn't touching him. There was nothing romantic about their posture, yet there was something deeply personal in the way they looked at one another. The kind of look shared by two people carrying the same difficult conversation. Maya stood perfectly still. The sounds around her faded. The piano, the conversations, the clinking glasses. Everything became distant. Her eyes remained fixed on Ethan. At that exact moment, he looked up. Their eyes met. Time seemed to stop. The color drained from Ethan's face. He pushed his chair back so quickly, it scraped loudly across the wooden floor. Maya! Her name barely escaped his lips. Claire turned toward the entrance. She immediately understood. This is Maya, she realized. For several long seconds, no one moved. Other diners glanced toward the unexpected silence. Maya's mind searched desperately for another explanation. Maybe this really was business. Maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe. Then she remembered the text. An investor from New York landed unexpectedly. There was no investor. Only one woman. One table. One lie. Ethan slowly walked toward her. Maya. She held up a trembling hand. Please. Her voice was calm, almost unbelievably calm. Don't. I can explain. She looked directly into his eyes. It wasn't anger he saw there. It was heartbreak struggling to understand. You told me you were in a meeting. I know. You said it was an emergency. It was complicated. She gave a faint, almost disbelieving smile. No. She shook her head gently. It wasn't complicated. It was a choice. Those words struck Ethan harder than any accusation could have. Claire remained seated. She lowered her eyes, feeling like an unwilling witness to a pain she had never wanted to cause. Several nearby diners quietly returned to their meals, sensing they were witnessing something intensely private. Maya took one slow breath. I don't know who she is. I don't know why you're here. And, right now. She paused, fighting back tears. I'm not sure I want to know. She turned toward the exit. Ethan instinctively reached out. Maya, please. She stopped without turning around. My grandmother once told me something. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Trust isn't destroyed the day someone lies. It's destroyed the moment they decide the truth isn't worth giving you. She closed her eyes. I defended you in my mind before I ever questioned you. I told myself there had to be a good reason. I believed you. Her voice cracked for the first time. Because I loved you. Without waiting for a response, Maya walked out into the cool Chicago night. The restaurant doors closed softly behind her. Ethan stood frozen. Not because he had been caught, but because, for the first time in his life, he understood exactly what his mother must have felt all those years ago. One lie, one dinner, one moment of silence, and everything he had spent months building suddenly felt as fragile as glass. Across the street, Maya kept walking. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay. Behind her, Bellissimo remained filled with warm lights and quiet conversations. Ahead of her stretched a city that suddenly felt colder than it had only minutes before. Neither of them realized that tonight wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of the hardest lessons either of them would ever have to learn about love, honesty, and the price of avoiding the truth. The restaurant doors closed behind Maya with a soft click. The cool October air met her flushed face as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Traffic continued moving through downtown Chicago as though nothing extraordinary had happened. A taxi stopped at a nearby light. Two teenagers laughed while sharing a slice of pizza. Someone across the street played a saxophone, its mellow notes drifting through the evening. The city hadn't changed. Only her world had. Maya kept walking. She wasn't running. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Her grandmother had always said that real heartbreak rarely arrived like a storm. It arrived like winter, quietly, 1 degree at a time. Inside Bellissimo, Ethan remained standing where Maya had left him. He stared at the closed entrance, hoping she would walk back through the door. She didn't. Claire slowly stood from her chair. You should go after her. Ethan looked toward the street outside. I don't think she'd want to see me. Probably not. He lowered his head. I ruined everything. Claire picked up her coat. No. You ruined trust. They're not always the same thing. Ethan looked at her with tired eyes. I'm sorry, Claire. She gave him a sad smile. I know. You deserved honesty too. I did. She walked closer, stopping a few feet away. For months, I kept hoping you'd choose. I wasn't asking you to choose me. I was asking you to stop making decisions based on fear. Ethan swallowed hard. I thought I could fix everything before anyone got hurt. Claire gently shook her head. That's the problem with secrets. They never stay small. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Claire extended her hand. I think this is goodbye. He looked at her hand before shaking it. Goodbye, Claire. I sincerely hope you become the man you've been trying so hard to pretend you already are. Those words lingered in the air long after she walked away. Ethan watched her leave. For the first time since they had met, there was nothing left unsaid between them. Ironically, the only person he still couldn't face was the woman who mattered most. Maya eventually found herself standing beside the Chicago River. The water reflected thousands of lights dancing across its surface. She leaned against the railing, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind grew colder. Her phone vibrated. Ethan calling. She stared at the screen. It stopped. A few seconds later, another call. She declined it. Almost immediately, a message appeared. Please let me explain. She locked the phone without replying. 5 minutes later, it vibrated again. I'm outside your apartment. She closed her eyes. He knew she wasn't there. He was guessing, or hoping. She slipped the phone into her purse. Tonight, explanations felt too small. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in his car outside Maya's apartment building. The velvet jewelry box rested on the passenger seat. The gold compass necklace inside suddenly felt painfully symbolic. A compass could point someone in the right direction. It couldn't undo the wrong turn they had already taken. He looked up at the dark windows of Maya's apartment. No lights, no movement. He knew she wasn't home. Still, he waited. 30 minutes became an hour. People entered the building. Others left. Every woman who approached from a distance made his heart lift for a second, before sinking again. Around 10 o'clock, Daniel called. Ethan? Yeah. You missed the board dinner. I know. There was a pause. You sound terrible. I am. Daniel didn't ask what had happened. Instead, he asked something simpler. Where are you? Outside Maya's apartment. And? She's not here. Another silence. Then Daniel spoke quietly. You can't solve tonight by staying in a parked car. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I don't know what else to do. You start by telling the complete truth. Not the version that protects you. The complete truth. Those words struck Ethan because they echoed the advice his mother had unknowingly given him decades earlier. For years, he had believed protecting people meant shielding them from painful conversations. Now he was beginning to understand something different. Avoiding pain didn't prevent it. It postponed it. And postponed pain often returned with interest. Near midnight, Maya finally arrived home. She noticed Ethan's car parked across the street before she reached the entrance. She stopped walking. He was asleep behind the steering wheel, his head resting against the window. For a moment, she simply watched him. He looked exhausted, older somehow. A part of her wanted to walk over, wake him gently, and ask for the truth. Another part remembered the restaurant, the text, the lie. She quietly turned away. Crossing to the opposite side of the street, she entered her building through the rear entrance. She wasn't trying to punish him. She simply wasn't ready. From her apartment window 15 minutes later, she looked down at the street. Ethan's car was still there. She rested her forehead against the cool glass. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then another, not because she knew everything, but because she no longer knew what was true. That uncertainty hurt more than certainty ever could. Across the street, Ethan woke, just before dawn. The first rays of sunlight stretched between the buildings as he looked once more toward Maya's apartment. He whispered into the empty car, I'll tell you everything. But promises made after trust is broken sound very different from promises made before. As the city welcomed a new morning, neither Ethan nor Maya realized that the hardest conversation of their lives was still ahead. And when it finally came, it wouldn't simply determine whether their relationship survived. It would determine the kind of people they chose to become. Monday morning arrived without sunlight. A blanket of gray clouds stretched over Chicago, turning the city into a landscape of muted colors and quiet reflections. Maya Brooks sat alone in her apartment, a steaming cup of coffee growing cold beside her untouched breakfast. She had barely slept, not because she kept replaying what she had seen at Bellissimo. Oddly enough, that wasn't what haunted her most. It was everything she hadn't seen. Who was the woman? Why had Ethan lied? Why did he look relieved and devastated at exactly the same time when their eyes met? And perhaps the hardest question of all, had the man she loved been pretending for months? Or had she walked into the middle of something she didn't yet understand? The uncertainty was exhausting. Her phone rested face down on the kitchen table. 23 unread messages. 7 missed calls, every one of them from Ethan. She hadn't opened a single message. Not because she wanted to punish him, because she wasn't ready for his version of the story until she understood her own thoughts. Her grandmother had once told her, "Never make permanent decisions while your heart is louder than your wisdom." For the first time since Friday night, Maya decided she would wait. Not forever, just long enough to think clearly. Across the city, Ethan sat in his office, but nothing about his morning resembled work. The quarterly reports lay untouched. His coffee had gone cold. Even Daniel noticed something was different. After knocking gently, he stepped inside. "You've cancelled 3 meetings." "I know. You've never done that before." "I know." Daniel closed the office door. "I'm not here as your assistant. I'm here as someone who's watched you build this company from 12 employees to 12,000. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "I appreciate that." Daniel looked at him carefully. "Did something happen with Maya?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Finally, "I lied." Daniel didn't interrupt. "I told myself it was one harmless lie." "It wasn't." Daniel nodded slowly. "They never are." For several moments, the room remained silent. Then Daniel asked the only question that mattered. "Does she know?" "She knows I lied. But she doesn't know why." "And you're waiting for the perfect moment to explain?" Ethan looked away. "I guess I am." Daniel sighed. "Ethan, there isn't a perfect moment. There are only honest ones." Before Ethan could respond, his office phone rang. Daniel glanced at the display. "It's the merger communications team. I'll tell them you're unavailable." Ethan nodded gratefully. As Daniel left the room, Ethan stared at the city skyline. The distance between 2 skyscrapers suddenly seemed easier to cross than the distance between himself and Maya. That afternoon, Maya returned to the community arts center. Work usually helped quiet her thoughts. Today, even architecture couldn't silence them. She stood beneath the soaring glass atrium reviewing lighting plans when Elena approached. "You've been avoiding your phone." Maya looked up. "How did you know?" "Because it keeps vibrating inside your purse." Maya managed a small smile. "He keeps calling." "And?" "I haven't answered." Elena folded the blueprint in her hands. "Are you planning to?" "I don't know. What do you want?" Maya looked across the nearly completed lobby. Children would soon laugh here. Artists would fill the walls. Families would make memories inside a building she had spent 3 years designing. Everything meaningful took time to build, including trust. "I want the truth. Not excuses. Not apologies. The truth." Elena nodded. "Then don't rush. Truth doesn't disappear because it waits a day." Maya appreciated those words. Everyone else seemed eager for immediate answers. Elena understood something different. Sometimes, healing begins with patience rather than confrontation. Meanwhile, several miles away, another conversation was unfolding. Claire Reynolds stood outside a downtown coffee shop after finishing a client meeting. She noticed Ethan's name appear on her phone. She hesitated, then answered, "Hello? Claire?" "Ah." His voice sounded tired. "I need to speak with you." She looked through the cafe window as people laughed over afternoon coffee. "I don't think that's a good idea. I owe you a conversation. You owe someone else one first." The words were gentle, not cruel, just honest. Ethan closed his eyes. "I know. I'm serious." "So am I." Claire continued quietly, "Ethan, for months, every difficult decision in your life has become tomorrow's problem." Tomorrow finally arrived. Neither of them spoke. Finally, she added, "When you're ready to have the conversation you've been avoiding. Don't call me. Call Maya." The line went silent. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Claire hadn't given him answers. She had given him direction. Whether he had the courage to follow it remained uncertain. As evening settled over Chicago, Maya finally picked up her phone. She didn't open Ethan's messages. Instead, she opened their old photo album. Pictures from weekend road trips, coffee shops, museum visits, snowball fights, volunteer events, ordinary moments, real smiles. Nothing looked fake. Nothing looked rehearsed. She whispered to herself, "Were you lying then? Or are you lying now?" The question echoed through the quiet apartment. There was no answer, only silence. Outside, rain began falling gently against the windows. Inside, Maya made one quiet decision. Before she listened to Ethan, she needed to know exactly what questions she wanted answered. Because this conversation, whenever it happened, would change both of their lives forever. By Wednesday morning, life in Chicago had resumed its familiar rhythm. Rush hour traffic filled the streets. Coffee shops buzzed with conversations. Construction crews returned to work before sunrise. To everyone else, it was another ordinary weekday. For Maya Brooks, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She had always believed that people revealed who they were through patterns rather than isolated moments. One mistake could be human. Repeated choices created a pattern. That thought stayed with her as she walked into the community arts center, carrying a stack of revised drawings. "Morning," one of the contractors called. "Morning." She smiled politely before returning to work. She welcomed the distraction. Measurements made sense. Steel beams followed calculations. Buildings either stood or they didn't. People were far more complicated. During lunch, Maya slipped away to a nearby cafe overlooking the river. She ordered tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, but barely touched either. Instead, she opened her notebook. On a blank page, she wrote 2 columns. What I know, what I'm assuming. Under the first heading, she wrote, "Ethan cancelled dinner. He said he had an emergency business meeting. I saw him having dinner with another woman. He admitted he lied. He asked to explain." She paused before writing under the second heading, "He's having an affair. He's been lying for months. Everything about our relationship was false." She stared at the second list. Then, one by one, she crossed every sentence out. Not because they couldn't be true, because she didn't actually know. Her grandmother had often warned her about confusing suspicion with certainty. "Truth doesn't become stronger because we imagine the missing pieces," she used to say. Maya closed the notebook. "I owe myself facts," she whispered, "not guesses." At Caldwell Global Holdings, Ethan found it almost impossible to concentrate. He walked into the weekly executive meeting carrying the wrong folder. Halfway through a presentation, he realized he hadn't heard a single word spoken during the previous 10 minutes. "Ethan?" A board member looked toward him. "Do you agree with the proposal?" He blinked. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?" Several executives exchanged surprised glances. Daniel noticed immediately. This wasn't the focused leader they knew. After the meeting ended, Daniel caught up with him in the hallway. "You need a break. I need to fix my life." Those aren't mutually exclusive. Ethan managed a tired smile. "I don't deserve your optimism." "This isn't optimism. It's perspective." Daniel stopped walking. "I've worked with you for 11 years. I've watched you solve problems worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But this..." He shook his head. "This isn't a business problem. It's a relationship. You can't manage it like a company." Ethan sighed. "I know." "No." Daniel looked him directly in the eye. "I don't think you do. Because if you did, you'd stop trying to control the outcome and start preparing yourself for whatever the truth costs." Those words followed Ethan long after Daniel walked away. That evening, Maya decided to do something she had avoided since Friday. She visited Bellissimo, not to confront anyone, not to recreate the painful memory, simply to understand the place where everything had changed. The restaurant was quieter than usual. The hostess recognized her immediately. "Welcome back." Maya smiled politely. "I'd like a table by the window if that's okay." "Of course." A few minutes later, she found herself sitting only a short distance from where she had seen Ethan. The same warm lighting, the same piano music, the same soft conversations. Nothing about the restaurant looked sinister. It was simply a place where people shared meals. The waiter approached. "What can I get for you this evening?" "The lemon mascarpone cheesecake. And coffee." "Excellent choice." As he walked away, Maya looked toward the corner table. She remembered Ethan standing so quickly that his chair scraped across the floor. She remembered the shock on his face. She remembered something else. The woman, Claire. She hadn't looked smug. She hadn't looked triumphant. If anything, she had looked sad. The realization unsettled Maya. If this had been a secret romance, why had neither of them appeared happy? Why had Ethan looked terrified instead of relieved? Why had the other woman lowered her eyes instead of celebrating? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Just then, an elderly couple was seated at the table beside hers. The husband carefully pulled out his wife's chair before sitting down. They smiled at each other, with the ease that comes only after many years together. "You still insist on doing that," the woman teased. "I always will." He shrugged. "My father taught me that respect shouldn't become less important just because time passes." His wife reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "And my mother taught me never to assume I know what someone is thinking." The two laughed softly. Maya couldn't help smiling. Sometimes wisdom appeared in the most ordinary conversations. She finished her coffee slowly, her mind calmer than it had been in days. Maybe she wasn't ready to forgive. Maybe she wasn't even ready to listen. But she was beginning to understand something important. If she truly wanted the truth, she couldn't let her past write the ending before the present had spoken. Across town, Ethan unlocked the front door of his apartment. The silence greeted him immediately. He loosened his tie and noticed the velvet jewelry box still sitting inside the desk drawer. He opened it. The tiny gold compass reflected the light from the kitchen. He turned it over in his hand. A compass didn't erase wrong turns. It simply reminded travelers that a different direction was still possible. He closed the box again, not because he had given up, because he knew no gift could replace the conversation he still owed Maya. Outside his window, the lights of Chicago stretched endlessly into the night. Somewhere within that city, the woman he loved was searching for answers. And for the first time since Bellissimo, Ethan realized he needed to stop hoping she would come to him. If he wanted even the smallest chance of earning back her trust, he would have to meet her with nothing but the truth. What he didn't know was that before either of them spoke again, someone else would unknowingly place one final piece of the puzzle into Maya's hands. And that discovery would change the questions she was asking forever. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were in Maya's position, would you keep searching for the truth before making a final decision? Or would the lie itself be enough for you to walk away? Share your answer in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone else who is facing a similar situation in real life. If you're enjoying this story and the meaningful life lessons woven throughout it, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications so you never miss another heartfelt story about love, trust, forgiveness, and second chances. Now, let's continue, because sometimes the answers we're searching for don't arrive all at once. They come one piece at a time. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in a light mist that softened the edges of Chicago's skyline. Inside the Community Arts Center, volunteers hurried through the lobby, carrying boxes of brochures, artwork, and decorations for the grand opening. The building finally felt alive. Children from a nearby elementary school laughed as they toured the rehearsal rooms. Teachers admired the bright classrooms. Local artists carefully hung paintings along the gallery walls. Normally, this would have been Maya's favorite kind of day. Watching people enjoy a space she had imagined years earlier always reminded her why she became an architect. Today, however, she caught herself staring through the glass walls instead of admiring them. Earth to Maya. Elena waved a hand in front of her face. You've been standing here for almost 2 minutes. Maya smiled apologetically. Sorry, you're somewhere else. I know. Elena handed her a clipboard. Walk with me. They moved slowly through the building, checking final details before opening day. The lighting looks perfect, Elena said. It finally does. The volunteers love the children's reading corner. I'm glad. Elena stopped walking. Maya, what? You don't have to pretend you're okay around me. Maya sighed softly. I'm trying not to let one part of my life ruin everything else. That's healthy. I don't know if it's healthy. I think I'm just tired. Tired of thinking. Tired of not knowing. Elena nodded. Those are two different kinds of exhaustion. That afternoon, Maya stopped at a neighborhood bookstore on her way home. Browsing books had always helped clear her mind. She wandered slowly between the shelves before selecting a novel she'd been meaning to read. As she approached the checkout counter, someone called her name. Maya? She turned. Standing near the cafe inside the bookstore was a woman she recognized almost immediately. Linda Pearson, one of the board members who had attended several charity events with Caldwell Global. Linda? What a surprise. They hugged warmly. I heard your arts center opens next week, Linda said. It does. You should be proud. We're almost there. Linda smiled. And how's Ethan? The question caught Maya off guard. She hesitated just long enough for Linda to notice. We're... She searched for the right word. Working through something. Linda's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. Before Maya could respond, Linda added casually, I've hardly seen him smile lately. You've seen him? We were both at the hospital fundraiser on Tuesday. Maya frowned slightly. I thought he cancelled. He almost did. But he came for about 30 minutes. Linda laughed. He looked like he'd forgotten how to hold a conversation. He left before the dinner even started. Something about that detail stayed with Maya. Ethan had always supported charity events. If he had truly wanted to avoid being seen, why attend at all? It wasn't proof of anything, but it didn't fit the picture she had been building in her mind. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment reading through a folder he had opened 3 separate times without making it past the first page. His phone buzzed. It was his mother. He answered immediately. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart." Her warm voice carried the same quiet calm it always had. "I haven't heard from you in almost a week." "I've been busy." "You've never been too busy to call." Ethan smiled faintly. "You know me too well." "I do." There was a brief pause. "Something's wrong." He looked around the silent apartment. "How can you always tell?" "Because you sound exactly like your father used to sound whenever he carried something he didn't want to face." The comparison hit him harder than she realized. He closed his eyes. "I don't want to be like him." "I know. But wanting isn't enough." His mother spoke gently, without judgment. "When your father and I struggled, the affair hurt. But do you know what hurt even more?" Ethan remained silent. "The months I spent wondering whether my own instincts could still be trusted." She sighed. "I kept asking myself whether I was imagining things, whether I was becoming suspicious, whether I was being unfair." She paused. That uncertainty was its own kind of heartbreak. Ethan swallowed hard. "I never understood that." "I know. Most people don't." Another silence settled between them. Finally, Margaret asked, "Is there someone you've hurt?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes." "Do you love her?" "More than anything." "Then don't protect yourself with silence. Protect her with truth." The conversation ended a few minutes later, but her words remained. Protect her with truth. Not tomorrow. Not when the timing felt perfect. Today. Meanwhile, Maya returned home carrying the novel she had purchased. She placed it on the coffee table before noticing something tucked inside the front cover. A small bookmark had slipped loose. Printed across it was a quotation. "The truth rarely arrives all at once. It usually comes one honest conversation at a time." She smiled despite herself. It felt strangely comforting. Maybe answers didn't have to appear all in one moment. Maybe understanding could arrive piece by piece. She walked toward the living room window and looked out over the city. Somewhere beyond those lights, Ethan was living with his own silence. For the first time since Bellissimo, Maya admitted something to herself. She wasn't afraid of hearing the truth. She was afraid that, once she heard it, life would never feel the same again. As rain began tapping softly against the glass, she whispered into the quiet apartment, "When we're ready to talk, I hope we're both brave enough to tell the whole truth." She didn't know that, before the weekend arrived, someone from Ethan's professional life would unexpectedly cross her path. And that meeting would reveal the first undeniable fact about the mysterious woman from Bellissimo, without revealing the entire story. Friday afternoon arrived with crisp autumn air sweeping through downtown Chicago. For Ethan Caldwell, the past 7 days had felt longer than the previous 7 months. Every morning began with the same thought. "I need to talk to Maya." Every evening ended with the same realization. She wasn't ready. And he had no right to force the conversation. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan discovered that consequences could not be negotiated. They had to be lived. Daniel knocked gently before entering Ethan's office. "I've moved your afternoon appointments." Ethan looked up from his desk. "I didn't ask you to." "I know. You weren't paying attention to any of them anyway." A faint smile crossed Ethan's face. "You've become awfully honest." "I learned from the best." Daniel sat across from him. "You look exhausted." "I haven't slept much." "I can see that." For a few moments, neither man spoke. Then Daniel asked quietly, "Have you talked to her?" "No." "Has she answered any of your messages?" "No." Daniel leaned back. "Then stop sending them." Ethan frowned. "What?" "If Maya knows anything about you, and I think she does, she already knows you're trying to reach her. Another message won't change that." "So what do I do?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "You prepare yourself." "For what?" "For the possibility that honesty won't immediately earn forgiveness." Those words settled heavily between them. Ethan nodded slowly. "I think that's what scares me." Daniel stood. "It should. But don't let fear make another decision for you." After he left, Ethan remained alone, staring at the family photograph on his bookshelf. It showed him and his mother standing on the front porch of her house 3 Christmases earlier. Both were smiling. Neither knew then that the greatest lesson she had ever tried to teach him would one day become the hardest one to live. Across the city, Claire Reynolds finished a presentation inside a downtown law firm. As she gathered her laptop and notes, one of the attorneys smiled. "Excellent work, Claire." "Thank you. You made a complicated situation sound simple." She laughed softly. "I wish every complicated situation were that easy." Outside, the cool breeze greeted her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. She had barely taken 10 steps before hearing someone call her name. "Claire?" She turned. It was Linda Pearson. one of the longtime board members who frequently attended Caldwell Global charity events. Linda, what a coincidence. They exchanged a warm hug. Still keeping every executive in Chicago organized? Linda teased. Claire laughed. I try. They chatted for several minutes about work, community projects, and the upcoming arts center opening. Then Linda casually mentioned something that made Claire's smile fade. I ran into Maya Brooks yesterday. Claire looked down for a brief moment. You did? She seemed quieter than usual. Claire nodded slowly. I imagine she would. Linda studied her expression. You know her? Not personally, but I know of her. I've heard wonderful things. Linda smiled. She's one of the kindest people I've ever met. Claire looked toward the busy street. I don't doubt that. There was genuine sadness in her voice. Not jealousy, not bitterness, only regret. That evening, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. It was Claire. He answered immediately. Hello? We need to finish the conversation we started. I thought you said I should talk to Maya. I did. And you should. But before you do... She paused. There's something I need to say. An hour later, they met in a quiet public park overlooking Lake Michigan. No restaurant, no private room, no hidden corner. Just two people standing beneath trees that had begun turning shades of gold and crimson. Claire folded her hands inside the pockets of her coat. This won't take long. Ethan nodded. I'm listening. She looked out across the water before speaking. When we first met, I admired you. You were thoughtful, respectful. You actually listened. I wasn't looking for a relationship. Neither was I. He remained silent, but somewhere along the way, our friendship crossed a line. I should have stepped away. So should you. Ethan lowered his eyes. I know. Claire continued gently. Do you know what finally convinced me this had to end? He shook his head. It wasn't because of Maya. It was because I realized every important decision in your life began with the words, saddened, not today. She smiled sadly. Not today, I'll tell her. Not today, I'll end this. Not today, I'll face the consequences. She looked directly into his eyes. Ethan. You never actually chose me. You only postponed choosing her. Those words landed with quiet force. For months, Ethan had told himself he was protecting everyone involved. Claire's honesty exposed what he had refused to admit. He hadn't been protecting anyone. He had been protecting himself from difficult conversations. Claire reached into her handbag and removed a small envelope. I almost threw this away. She handed it to him. Inside was a reservation confirmation, Bellissimo, dated nearly 3 months earlier. I cancelled that dinner. Ethan looked at her, confused. You remember? You said you couldn't make it. I was disappointed. But, afterward, I realized we couldn't keep pretending friendship explained everything. She looked back toward the lake. Last Friday wasn't supposed to be a romantic dinner. It was supposed to be our final conversation. The one we should have had months ago. Ethan closed the envelope. I wish I'd handled everything differently. I know. Claire smiled faintly. The tragedy isn't that you made a mistake. It's that fear convinced you honesty could wait. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Claire extended her hand one last time. I sincerely hope Maya listens. And I sincerely hope you tell her everything. No protecting yourself. No editing the story. No convenient omissions. The whole truth. Ethan shook her hand. You have my word. Claire smiled. I hope this is the last promise you ever have to prove. She turned and walked away, disappearing along the lakeside path without looking back. Ethan remained where he was. The evening breeze rustled the trees overhead. For the first time since Bellissimo, there were no unfinished conversations between him and Claire. Only one remained, the most important one. Across the city, completely unaware of what had just taken place, Maya unlocked the door to her apartment. As she bent to pick up her mail, a small cream-colored envelope slid onto the floor. There was no return address. Only her name, written neatly across the front. She frowned, slowly picked it up, and carried it inside. Whatever was inside that envelope would become the first step toward the conversation both she and Ethan could no longer avoid. Maya stood quietly in the middle of her apartment, the cream-colored envelope resting in her hands. Outside, rain tapped gently against the living room windows. The city lights shimmered through the glass, like distant stars blurred by water. She turned the envelope over. No stamp, no return address, just her name. Maya Brooks, written in neat black ink. For several seconds, she simply looked at it. After everything that had happened during the past week, she had grown cautious of surprises. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. No signature, no greeting, only a few carefully written sentences. Sometimes the hardest truths are delayed, not because they are easy to hide, but because someone is too afraid to face the consequences. If you truly want answers, don't settle for assumptions. Ask every question you need to ask, then decide. Maya read the note twice, then a third time. It wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation to seek the truth before writing the final chapter herself. She folded the paper carefully and returned it to the envelope. Who had sent it? Why anonymously? And how did they know enough about her situation to write those words? She had no answers. Only another question. Yet, strangely, instead of increasing her anger, the note quieted it. For the first time since Bellissimo, she found herself wondering whether avoiding the conversation had become another form of fear. The next morning, Maya arrived early at the Community Arts Center. The building buzzed with anticipation. Tomorrow would be the official grand opening. Volunteers arranged flowers. Local musicians rehearsed in the auditorium. Children from neighborhood schools painted colorful welcome signs. Life continued moving forward. Elena found Maya reviewing the final checklist. "You beat me here." "I couldn't sleep." Elena noticed the envelope sticking out of Maya's notebook. "Everything okay?" "I'm not sure." Maya handed her the anonymous note. Elena read it silently before giving it back. "What do you think?" "I think whoever wrote this knows something." "Do you?" Maya looked toward the tall glass windows. "I don't know. But I also think they're right." "About what?" "I've been avoiding one conversation because I'm afraid of the answer." Elena smiled gently. "Being ready to listen doesn't mean you're ready to forgive." "I know. They're two different decisions." "I know." Maya took a slow breath. "I think it's finally time to hear him." Across town, Ethan stood in his mother's garden, helping her trim the last roses before winter. Margaret Caldwell carefully clipped a faded bloom. "Your father hated gardening." Ethan smiled faintly. "I remember. He thought flowers took too long." She looked up. "I always thought they taught patience." For a while, they worked in comfortable silence. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I saw Maya." Margaret stopped trimming. "Did you talk?" "No. I saw her. And she walked away." His mother nodded slowly. "Sometimes people need distance before they can hear truth." "I know. I'm just afraid that distance becomes forever." Margaret placed the gardening shears on the bench. "Ethan," he looked at her, "when you were 12, you saw more than your father and I ever realized." His expression changed. "You knew?" "A mother always knows." She smiled sadly. "I also knew you blamed your father for everything." "I did. And now?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "Now I understand that his greatest mistake wasn't only what he did. It was believing he could postpone honesty until the damage became impossible to repair." Margaret reached for his hand. "Then don't repeat that mistake." "I won't, even if telling the truth costs you the relationship." He nodded. "I'll tell her everything, no matter what happens afterward." His mother squeezed his hand gently. "That's the first, truly courageous thing you've said all week." Late that afternoon, Maya stood beside the Chicago River, watching tour boats glide across the water. The anonymous letter remained tucked safely inside her purse. She unlocked her phone, scrolled to Ethan's name. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For nearly a minute, she couldn't bring herself to move. Finally, she typed a single message. "We need to talk." She stared at the words, then pressed send. The reply came less than 30 seconds later. "Whenever you're ready, I'll come to you, or meet you wherever you choose." No excuses, no long explanation, no pressure. She appreciated that. After a moment's thought, she typed again. "Tomorrow, after the Arts Center opening, 6 o'clock, the bench by Lake Michigan." It was the same bench where they had once talked for hours about dreams, family, and the future they hoped to build together. A few seconds later, his reply appeared. "I'll be there." Maya locked her phone and slipped it back into her coat pocket. The decision brought neither relief nor fear, only clarity. Tomorrow wouldn't determine whether their relationship survived. Tomorrow would determine whether the truth was finally strong enough to stand on its own. As the evening sun broke briefly through the clouds, casting golden light across the lake, Maya whispered softly to herself, "No more assumptions. Only answers." Far across the city, Ethan looked at her message one final time before placing his phone in his pocket. Tomorrow. After days of silence, Months of avoidance. And years of carrying fears he had never named. The conversation he had spent so long postponing had finally arrived. And neither of them would leave that bench the same person who had sat down. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Chicago feel both alive and reflective. By noon, the community arts center buzzed with excitement. Families filled the lobby. Children hurried from one exhibit to another with wide eyes. Local musicians played gentle jazz near the entrance while artists proudly stood beside their work, answering questions from curious visitors. For Maya Brooks, the opening represented 3 years of late nights, difficult decisions, and unwavering determination. Today should have been one of the happiest days of her career. Everyone congratulated her. The mayor praised the project. Community leaders thanked her for creating a place that would bring people together for generations. She smiled politely, accepted every handshake, posed for photographs. Yet a small part of her mind remained fixed on 6 o'clock. The bench, the conversation, the truth. Across the city, Ethan spent the afternoon doing something he had avoided all week. He wrote, not an email, not a business proposal, a letter. He knew he might never give it to Maya. Perhaps she would refuse to see it. Perhaps she wouldn't need it after they talked. Still, he wrote, not because he wanted to persuade her, because he wanted to make sure he hid behind nothing. Every sentence forced him to confront a truth he had spent months avoiding. He crossed out every excuse, removed every sentence that sounded like self-defense. When he finally finished, only one page remained. At the bottom, he wrote, whether you forgive me or not, you deserve the whole truth. He folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his jacket pocket. At 5:45, Maya arrived at the bench overlooking Lake Michigan. The lake stretched endlessly beneath the evening sky, reflecting shades of blue, silver, and gold. The same bench, the same view, the same gentle sound of waves reaching the shore. Only the people sitting there had changed. She stood quietly for several moments before sitting down. Her heartbeat remained steady, not because she wasn't nervous, because she had already cried all the tears fear could produce. Now, she simply wanted honesty. At precisely 6 o'clock, Ethan approached from the walking path. He wore a dark navy overcoat over a charcoal sweater. No bodyguards, no driver, no briefcase. Just a man carrying the weight of his own decisions. He stopped several feet away. Hi. Maya looked up. Hi. Neither moved. Neither smiled. The silence wasn't hostile. It was careful. Finally, Ethan spoke. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. She nodded toward the empty space beside her. You can sit. He did, leaving enough distance between them to respect the uncertainty that now existed. For almost a minute, they simply watched the lake. Years earlier, comfortable silence had brought them peace. Tonight, it demanded courage. Maya broke it first. I'm not here because I stopped hurting. I know. I'm here because I don't want my imagination answering questions that only you can answer. Ethan lowered his eyes. That's fair. She turned toward him. So don't waste this opportunity. I won't. She took a slow breath. I only have one request. Anything. No half-truths. No carefully chosen details. If I ask something, answer exactly what I asked. You have my word. She held his gaze for a long moment. This isn't a business meeting, Ethan. I know. You can't negotiate your way through it. I know. You can't manage my emotions. I know. And you don't get to decide what information I can handle. A flicker of pain crossed his face. I understand. For the first time since Bellissimo, Maya saw something she hadn't expected. He wasn't preparing to defend himself. He was preparing to accept whatever happened next. That realization didn't erase the hurt, but it changed the atmosphere between them. She folded her hands together. Then let's begin. Her voice remained calm. When I walked into Bellissimo. Now, who was the woman sitting across from you? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Not because he wanted to avoid the question, because he refused to answer carelessly. Her name is Claire Reynolds. I met her through work. Maya listened without interrupting. We worked together during a corporate merger. What started as professional conversations slowly became something that crossed boundaries. He swallowed hard. I should have stopped it long before I did. You didn't. No. Why? The question lingered between them. Not angry, simply honest. Ethan looked out across the lake. When I was 12, my father came home with lipstick on his shirt. Maya remained silent. I watched my mother pretend everything was fine. I told myself I'd never become him. His voice grew quieter. When things became complicated with Claire, I kept thinking, If I can quietly fix this before Maya knows, then maybe no one gets hurt. He closed his eyes briefly. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from a difficult conversation. Maya studied him carefully. So the lie started before Bellissimo. Yes. It started the moment I convinced myself honesty could wait. The evening breeze carried fallen leaves across the path behind them. For several moments, Maya said nothing. She wasn't deciding whether to forgive him. She was measuring something else, whether the man sitting beside her had finally stopped hiding. Then she asked the next question, one he had feared from the beginning. Did you love her? The words hung quietly between them. Ethan lifted his eyes to meet hers. His answer would determine everything that followed. The wind swept gently across Lake Michigan, carrying with it the scent of cool water and fallen leaves. Neither Ethan nor Maya looked away. The question still hung between them. Did you love her? It wasn't asked with anger. It wasn't even asked with jealousy. It was the question that would help Maya understand whether she had been sharing Ethan's heart, or merely his time. Ethan took a slow breath. No. The answer came quietly, without hesitation, without qualification. Maya continued watching him. You answered too quickly. I answered truthfully. She searched his face for uncertainty. There wasn't any. So you never loved Claire? I cared about her. I respected her. I admired her professionally. But love? He shook his head slowly. No. Maya folded her hands together. Then help me understand something. If you loved me, why keep seeing her? Ethan looked toward the water before answering. Because every week I convinced myself I was about to end something I should never have allowed to continue. He paused. And every week I chose the easier conversation instead of the right one. Maya listened without interrupting. I kept telling myself, next week I'll tell Maya everything. Next week I'll end it properly. Next week I'll fix it before anyone gets hurt. A bitter smile crossed his face. I didn't realize that every next week was becoming another lie. The words settled heavily between them. For the first time, Maya wasn't hearing excuses. She was hearing someone describe how fear slowly became deception. You know what hurts the most? She asked softly. Ethan nodded. The lie. She shook her head. No. The confidence I had in your words. She looked down at her wedding finger. There had never been a ring there. Yet she suddenly understood why people described betrayal as something physical. I defended you. She smiled sadly. When you cancelled dinner, I actually felt guilty for being disappointed. I told myself, he's Ethan. If he says it's important, it must be. She looked back at him. I trusted you enough to argue against my own instincts. Those words struck Ethan harder than anything she had said all evening. He remembered his mother's voice from years ago. The months I spent wondering whether my own instincts could still be trusted. Now he finally understood. The betrayal wasn't only discovering the truth. It was questioning yourself afterward. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know those words aren't enough. They're not. I know. He reached into his coat pocket. I wrote something. He removed the folded letter. I don't expect you to read it now. I don't expect you to read it at all. I wrote it because I wanted to make sure there was nothing left unsaid. He placed it gently on the bench between them. Maya looked at the folded page but didn't touch it. For now. I'd rather hear you. He nodded. Then ask me anything. She took a long breath. Did Claire know about me? Yes. When? Not at first. But she learned several months ago. Maya's expression tightened slightly. And she stayed. Yes. Why? Because I kept telling her I was going to end things. Maya looked surprised. End things with me? No. End what existed between Claire and me. He continued quietly. She challenged me more than once. She told me I needed to stop delaying the truth. Maya frowned. She said that? More than once. And Bellissimo? He nodded slowly. She believed it was the last conversation we'd ever have. Maya absorbed that silently. So, when I walked in, you weren't starting something. You were trying to end it. Yes. She looked toward the lake again. The distinction mattered, not because it erased the lie, because it changed its shape. For days she had imagined romantic dinners, secret plans, hidden promises. Instead, she was looking at something messier, a man whose fear had grown into dishonesty. The damage remained, but the picture had become more complete. After several quiet moments, Maya asked another question. Can I ask you something difficult? You can ask me anything. When was the last time you lied to me? Ethan answered immediately. Last Friday. She looked at him carefully. I mean, after Bellissimo. His eyes didn't move. I haven't. No hidden meetings. No secret calls. No messages you've deleted? No. She continued, studying him. I need you to understand something. I do, if I ever discover another lie. Even a small one. I won't come back to another bench. There won't be another conversation. Ethan nodded. I understand, and I accept that. The sky had begun turning shades of orange and deep blue as the sun drifted lower over the lake. People walked past them with bicycles, dogs, and children. Life continued all around them. Neither Ethan nor Maya noticed. They were too busy standing at the edge of something neither of them could yet define. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't goodbye. It was something in between. Something fragile. Something that could only survive if every remaining word spoken that evening was completely true. Maya finally picked up the folded letter resting on the bench. She turned it over in her hands, then looked at Ethan. I'll read this later. He nodded. I think that's wise. She slipped the letter into her coat pocket. I have one last question. Ethan waited. Maya's voice softened. After everything that's happened, why didn't you just let me walk away? The question caught him off guard. He looked across the lake, then back at the woman he loved. His answer came from the deepest, most honest place he had reached in years. Because walking away would have protected me from hearing your pain. And for too long. I've been choosing what protects me. He swallowed. This time, I wanted to choose what respected you. For the first time that evening, Maya's eyes filled with tears. Not because the hurt was gone, but because she recognized something she hadn't seen before. The man sitting beside her had finally stopped hiding behind fear. Whether that would be enough, she still didn't know. The evening sun slipped lower behind the Chicago skyline, painting the surface of Lake Michigan in shades of amber and blue. For a long time, neither Ethan nor Maya spoke. There was nothing left to confess, nothing left to uncover. Only the quiet reality of what the truth had cost them. A jogger passed behind the bench. Somewhere farther down the path, a little girl laughed as she chased a flock of pigeons. Life continued with remarkable indifference to broken hearts. Maya slowly stood. Ethan remained seated. He didn't try to stop her. Didn't reach for her hand, didn't ask her to stay. He had spent too much of his life trying to control difficult moments. This one belonged to her. She looked down at him. I believe you. Those 4 words caught him by surprise. You do? I believe what you told me today. She paused. But believing your explanation. And trusting you again. Are not the same thing. Ethan lowered his eyes. I know. I don't think you fully do. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was tired. When Marcus betrayed me. Oh, I eventually stopped thinking about him. But it took much longer to stop questioning myself. She wrapped her coat tighter against the cool breeze. I don't want to live like that again. You shouldn't. I need time. Not because I'm trying to punish you, but because I need to find out whether the peace I had before Bellissimo still exists somewhere inside me. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. She looked out across the lake. For months, you kept making decisions for me. You decided what I could handle. You decided when I deserved the truth. You decided that silence would hurt less than honesty. He closed his eyes. She was right. Every word. So, now. I'm making one decision for myself. She met his eyes again. I'm choosing space. The sentence landed gently, not like a slammed door, more like one closing carefully. Ethan stood. I won't chase you. She seemed almost surprised. You won't? I've done enough deciding what you need. If space is what helps you heal, then that's what I'll respect. For the first time since they arrived at the bench, Maya allowed herself a small, sad smile. Thank you. She turned to leave. After taking a few steps, she stopped. Without looking back, she said quietly, You once told me that my buildings made people feel safe. I remember. I hope one day your words can feel that safe again. Then she walked away. Ethan watched until she disappeared beyond a row of maple trees glowing with autumn color. Only then did he sit back down. The bench suddenly felt much larger than before. Not because Maya was gone, because the future they had imagined together no longer existed. If there was going to be another future, it would have to be built from the ground up, just like trust, one honest choice at a time. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan kept the promise he had silently made on that bench. He didn't call. He didn't send flowers. He didn't leave surprise gifts at Maya's apartment. Not because he had stopped loving her. Because he finally understood that respecting someone sometimes means allowing them the freedom to heal without your presence. Instead, he focused on the only person whose choices he could change. Himself. He returned to therapy. He delegated more responsibilities at work. He visited his mother every Sunday, without fail. He began volunteering quietly at a mentorship program for teenage boys growing up without positive father figures. He never posted about it, never invited reporters, never mentioned it to anyone. He wasn't trying to repair his image. He was trying to become the man he wished that 12-year-old boy had grown up watching. Across the city, Maya poured herself into the community arts center. Children now filled the classrooms every afternoon. Music echoed through the auditorium. Parents thanked her for creating a place where families felt welcome. Some evenings, she still thought about Ethan. Other evenings, she didn't. Healing wasn't a straight path. It was a quiet collection of ordinary days that gradually hurt a little less. Winter arrived. The trees lost their leaves. Snow settled across the city. And somewhere beneath the silence of two separate lives, something was changing. Not their relationship, the people within it. Neither Ethan nor Maya knew whether their paths would ever cross again. But for the first time since one dinner, changed everything. Both had stopped asking, how do I get back what I lost? And started asking, who do I need to become? Sometimes, that is where every real love story begins again. 6 months later, spring arrived in Chicago with quiet determination. The snow had disappeared from sidewalks and parks, replaced by fresh green leaves, blooming tulips, and the familiar sound of children laughing outdoors again. Life had moved forward. So had Maya Brooks. The community arts center had become everything she had dreamed it would be. Every afternoon, children filled the classrooms with music, painting, dance, and laughter. Parents greeted one another in the lobby. Retirees volunteered as reading mentors. Teenagers discovered talents they never knew they possessed. The building no longer belonged to Maya. It belonged to the community. And somehow, that made her happier than any award ever could. Maya. She looked up from a stack of architectural drawings. Elena walked into her office, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I figured you'd forget lunch again. Maya laughed. You know me too well. I've earned that right. Elena handed her one of the cups before sitting across the desk. You've been smiling more lately. Have the first? You have. Maya looked through the office window at a group of children planting flowers outside. I think I've finally stopped measuring my happiness by what I lost. Elena smiled warmly. That's healing. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I used to believe healing meant forgetting. Now I think it means remembering without falling apart. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Elena asked gently, have you heard from Ethan? Maya shook her head. No. Not once. Does that surprise you? A little. It used to. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. But then I remembered something. What? I asked him for space. And for the first time in our relationship, he respected exactly what I asked for. Across the city, Caldwell Global Holdings looked exactly the same. Glass walls, busy hallways, conference rooms filled with strategy meetings. Yet something inside the company had quietly changed. Ethan Caldwell no longer worked 12-hour days. Every Wednesday afternoon, his calendar remained completely empty. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions. Daniel smiled as he noticed Ethan gathering his jacket. Wednesdays again? Ethan nodded. You know me. I do. Daniel leaned against the doorway. You've missed fewer family dinners in 6 months than you did in the previous 6 years. I was chasing the wrong success. Daniel chuckled. Took you long enough. It did. Ethan smiled. But I'm learning. He left the office carrying a backpack instead of a briefcase. Inside the backpack were notebooks, basketballs, and a box of donated books. Every Wednesday he volunteered at a mentoring program for teenage boys whose fathers were absent from their lives. He never invited photographers, never posted pictures online, never mentioned it during interviews. Most people didn't even know he volunteered there. The boys simply knew him as Ethan, the guy who always showed up. One afternoon, 13-year-old Marcus asked him, Mr. Ethan? You can just call me Ethan. Okay. Ethan. Can I ask you something? Of course. Were you always successful? Ethan smiled. No. Were you always confident? He laughed softly. Definitely not. The boy looked confused. But everybody says you're fearless. Ethan became quiet. Then he answered honestly, I've been afraid of the wrong things most of my life. What do you mean? I wasn't afraid of losing money. I wasn't afraid of failing in business. I was afraid of difficult conversations. The boy frowned. Why? Because I thought honesty always hurt people. And now? Ethan looked around the gymnasium where several boys were practicing basketball. Now I know that delaying honesty hurts people even more. Marcus nodded slowly. I think I understand. Ethan hoped he truly did. If someone had taught him that lesson when he was 13, his own life might have looked very different. Late one Saturday morning, Maya visited her grandmother in Atlanta. The small front porch looked exactly as it had throughout Maya's childhood. Fresh flowers, a rocking chair, wind chimes dancing softly in the breeze. Grandma Evelyn opened the front door before Maya could knock. I knew that was your car. You always know. A grandmother's heart hears things ears can't. They hugged tightly. Over homemade peach cobbler and sweet tea, they talked for hours. Family, work, the arts center, life. Eventually, Grandma Evelyn asked the question Maya knew would come. Have you forgiven him? Maya looked down at her teacup. I've forgiven the anger. Her grandmother waited. But trust. She gently shook her head. Trust grows slower. Grandma Evelyn reached across the table. Do you still love him? Maya didn't answer immediately. Finally, I stopped asking myself that question. What do you ask instead? She smiled softly. I ask whether the man I loved is becoming the man he truly wants to be. Her grandmother squeezed her hand. That's a much wiser question. Several days later, Chicago hosted its annual Community Leadership Awards. Business leaders, teachers, volunteers, architects, non-profit organizations, hundreds gathered to celebrate people making a difference across the city. Neither Maya nor Ethan knew the other had been invited. As Maya stepped into the ballroom wearing a simple navy evening dress, she accepted a program from a volunteer. She glanced down. Her eyes paused on one name. Community Mentor of the Year, Ethan Caldwell. Her heartbeat slowed, not from fear, from surprise. On the opposite side of the ballroom, Ethan accepted congratulations from several volunteers. He wasn't expecting applause. He certainly wasn't expecting to look across the crowded room and see Maya. Their eyes met. Neither waved. Neither hurried toward the other. Neither looked away. For the first time in 6 months, there was no anger between them. No accusations. No unfinished questions. Only two people quietly wondering whether time had changed more than the seasons. Neither realized that before the evening ended, they would have their first conversation since saying goodbye beside Lake Michigan. And this time, there would be no secrets left standing between them. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as guests mingled between elegantly decorated tables. Soft jazz drifted through the room. Waiters carried trays of sparkling water and appetizers, while conversations filled the air with easy laughter. For a long moment, Ethan and Maya simply looked at each other from opposite sides of the room. 6 months. That was how long it had been since they sat on the bench overlooking Lake Michigan. 6 months of separate lives, separate lessons, separate healing. Neither of them had imagined this would be the place where they would meet again. Ethan was the first to look away, not out of discomfort, out of respect. He didn't want Maya to feel cornered. He greeted another guest, accepted a handshake, and quietly stepped aside to allow people to continue enjoying the evening. Across the room, Maya noticed. She had expected many things: persistence, an awkward approach, an immediate apology. Instead, he gave her space, the same space she had asked for months earlier. For reasons she couldn't explain, that small gesture meant more than any speech could have. The awards ceremony began a few minutes later. The Master of Ceremonies welcomed everyone before recognizing community leaders who had dedicated their time and resources to improving lives across Chicago. When Ethan's category was announced, a short video played on the large screen. It wasn't footage of boardrooms or business conferences. Instead, it showed teenagers shooting basketballs in a neighborhood gym, reading together in a small library, working on homework around folding tables. One young boy smiled at the camera. Ethan never misses Wednesday. Another added, he listens more than he talks. A volunteer spoke next. He asked us never to publicize his donations. He said the program wasn't about him. Maya watched quietly. She hadn't known any of this. Not because Ethan had hidden it, because he had never felt the need to advertise it. The audience applauded as Ethan walked to the stage. He accepted the award with his usual calm expression. After thanking the organizers, he looked across the room. For a long time, he began, I believed success was measured by what I could build. He paused. I've learned that real success is measured by the people we help become stronger. The room fell silent. I also learned something else. It takes courage to admit when you've been wrong. And even more courage to become someone worthy of the trust you've broken. He smiled modestly. I'm still learning. Every day. The applause that followed wasn't loud because of his wealth. It was genuine. Because his words sounded lived rather than rehearsed. Maya lowered her eyes. For the first time, she realized Ethan no longer sounded like a man trying to convince others. He sounded like someone reminding himself. After the ceremony ended, guests gathered near the ballroom terrace overlooking the city. Maya stepped outside. The evening breeze carried the scent of spring flowers planted around the hotel gardens. She rested her hands lightly on the railing. Beautiful view. She recognized the voice immediately. Without turning around, she smiled faintly. It is. Ethan stopped several feet away. He didn't move closer. I wasn't sure if I should come over. You waited. I remembered what you asked for. Maya finally turned toward him. You remembered. I remember a lot of things. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya nodded toward the award inside the ballroom. Congratulations. Thank you. I didn't know. There wasn't much to tell. She tilted her head. Helping those boys seems like a lot. He smiled softly. They've helped me more than I've helped them. The honesty in his answer made her smile. A genuine smile. Small, but real. I liked your speech, she admitted. I almost didn't give it. Why? I wasn't sure I deserved the award. Maya looked at him thoughtfully. Maybe deserving isn't the point. He raised an eyebrow. What is? What you do after receiving it. The words settled gently between them. Neither felt the need to fill every silence anymore. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Ethan finally asked, How's the arts center? Her face brightened immediately. The children's music program already has a waiting list. Really? She laughed. And apparently I'm now the unofficial referee for 4th grade chess tournaments. I didn't see that in your job description. It wasn't. But I've learned that architects sometimes wear many hats. He smiled. I've missed hearing you talk about your work. She noticed something different. Months ago, Ethan would have shifted the conversation toward himself. Tonight, he simply listened. The hotel staff began clearing tables as the evening drew to a close. Guests slowly made their way toward the exits. Maya glanced at her watch. I should get going. Ethan nodded. I understand. She hesitated, then reached into her purse. From inside, she removed the folded letter he had given her at Lake Michigan. I read it. He looked at the familiar paper. I wasn't sure if you ever would. I waited almost 3 months. And? It didn't make me trust you again. He nodded. I didn't expect it to. But, she smiled gently. It helped me understand you. Those words meant more to Ethan than she realized. Understanding wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. Maya carefully folded the letter again. I kept one sentence. Which one? She looked directly into his eyes. Whether you forgive me or not, you deserve the whole truth. I think everyone deserves that. So do I. A comfortable silence followed. Finally, Maya spoke again. I don't know what happens next. I don't either. But... She took a slow breath. I don't think our story has to end because our first ending did. Ethan felt hope rise inside him. Not excitement. Hope. The quiet kind. The kind built on patience, rather than expectation. I'm not asking for another chance, he said. I know. I'm simply grateful we can stand here and have an honest conversation. She nodded. So am I. As they walked toward the hotel entrance together, they stopped beside the valet stand. Maya smiled. I drove myself. I assumed you would. She laughed. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't. For a brief moment, they simply stood there. Then Maya extended her hand. Good night, Ethan. He looked at her hand, then shook it gently. Good night, Maya. No embrace, no kiss, no dramatic declaration. Just two people choosing honesty over urgency. As Maya drove away, Ethan watched until her car disappeared into the Chicago traffic. He didn't feel like he had won her back, because he hadn't. He felt something much quieter. He had earned the possibility of a new beginning. And sometimes, possibility is where lasting love finds its first heartbeat. 3 months later, summer settled gently over Chicago. The trees lining the streets stood full and green. Outdoor cafes overflowed with conversation, and the city seemed lighter somehow, as though it had finally exhaled after a long winter. Life had continued moving forward. So had Ethan. So had Maya. After the Community Leadership Awards, they hadn't rushed back into a relationship. There were no late-night declarations of love, no dramatic reunions, No promises made in moments of overwhelming emotion. Instead, they started with coffee. One Saturday morning, a simple cafe overlooking Lake Michigan. They talked for 45 minutes, mostly about work, books, travel. The boys Ethan mentored, the children filling Maya's art center every afternoon. The conversation ended with a handshake. The following month, they met again, this time for lunch. Then they volunteered together during a neighborhood cleanup organized by the art center. Children recognized Maya immediately. "Miss Brooks!" A little girl ran toward her carrying a drawing. "I made this for you." Maya knelt to admire the colorful picture. "It's beautiful." The little girl pointed toward Ethan. "Is he your friend?" Maya looked at Ethan. He smiled politely from several feet away, giving her space to answer however she wished. She smiled back. "Yes. He's my friend." The answer warmed Ethan's heart more than he expected. Friend, it wasn't where they had once been. But it was honest, and honesty had become enough. One Wednesday afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected call. It was Grandma Evelyn. He smiled as soon as he heard her familiar voice. "Mrs. Brooks." She laughed warmly. "Young man, after all this time, I think you've earned the right to call me Evelyn." "I'll try." "You'd better." They both laughed. "I've been hearing good things about you." "I hope they're true." "They are." She became quiet for a moment. "You know, when Maya was little, she'd build tiny houses out of cardboard boxes." Ethan smiled. "I can believe that. One day I asked her why every little house had such a big front door." "What did she say?" "Because people shouldn't have to be afraid to come home." The words lingered in Ethan's mind. Grandma Evelyn continued gently. "My granddaughter has always believed that people deserve a place where they feel safe." "I know. I think she finally believes you're trying to become that kind of place." Emotion tightened Ethan's throat. "I'm trying. I know you are. But remember." She paused. "Consistency is louder than apology." "I won't forget." The following weekend, Maya invited Ethan to the art center. Not for a date, for a family community picnic. Children chased bubbles across the lawn. Parents unpacked homemade food. Local musicians played acoustic guitar beneath a shaded pavilion. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. As Ethan helped one of the boys assemble a kite, Maya watched from a distance. Elena quietly stepped beside her. So, you've been smiling again." Maya laughed. "You always notice." "I do." Elena folded her arms. "Does being around him still hurt?" Maya thought carefully before answering. "No. It reminds me." "Of what?" "That people can change." She looked toward Ethan as he patiently untangled the kite string. "But, more importantly, it reminds me that change isn't something people announce. It's something they practice." Elena smiled. "I think that's the healthiest thing you've ever said." As the afternoon came to an end, Ethan and Maya slowly walked toward the parking lot. The golden sunlight stretched across the grass, and the laughter of children faded behind them. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. Maya looked at him. "That's usually a dangerous sentence." He laughed. "It can be. I wanted to ask you something." She waited. "There isn't any pressure. No expectations. If you'd rather say no." "I'll understand." She smiled. "You've become very careful." "I've become very respectful." He nodded toward a small neighborhood Italian restaurant across the street. "Would you have dinner with me next Friday?" She looked toward the restaurant. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't famous. It certainly wasn't bellissimo. It was the kind of family-owned place where children colored on paper placemats while grandparents lingered over dessert. Simple, warm, honest. "Just dinner?" she asked. "Just dinner." "No speeches?" "No speeches." "No surprises?" He smiled. "Only if the chef burns the pasta." She laughed. The sound caught him completely by surprise. He realized how much he had missed hearing it. Maya looked at the little restaurant once more, then back at Ethan. "I'd like that." He didn't celebrate. He didn't pump his fist. He simply smiled. "Thank you." As they reached their cars, Maya stopped. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "This dinner. Don't lie about it." He met her eyes. "I never will again." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you." Those 3 words settled quietly between them. Months earlier, they would have sounded impossible. Now, they felt earned. Not because the past had disappeared, but because the future was finally being built differently. Neither of them realized that next Friday's dinner would quietly mirror another dinner from long ago. Only this time, no child would watch silence destroy a family. and no one at the table would have anything left to hide. Friday evening arrived quietly. There were no flashing cameras, no luxury ballroom, no reservations at one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Instead, Ethan parked outside a small family-owned Italian restaurant exactly 15 minutes early. He smiled to himself. For the first time in a long time, arriving early wasn't about making a good impression. It was about honoring a promise. At exactly 7 o'clock, Maya stepped out of her car. She wore a simple cream-colored dress beneath a light denim jacket. Her curls rested naturally on her shoulders, moving gently in the summer breeze. Ethan walked toward her. "You look beautiful." She smiled. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." "I tried. I can tell." They stood there for a moment, smiling like two people who no longer needed to impress each other, only to be honest. Ethan opened the restaurant door. "After you." "Thank you." Inside, the warm aroma of garlic, fresh bread, and basil welcomed them. Families laughed around nearby tables. A little boy proudly showed his grandmother a drawing he had colored while waiting for dinner. Soft piano music played through hidden speakers. Everything about the restaurant felt peaceful. Their waitress approached with a warm smile. "Good evening. Welcome. It's nice to see you both." After taking their drink orders, she left them alone. For a few moments, neither reached for the menu. Neither felt rushed to fill the silence. It was no longer the uncomfortable silence of hidden secrets. It was the comfortable silence of two people who had finally learned that honesty didn't require constant explanation. Maya looked around the restaurant. "I like this place. I hoped you would." "Why here?" Ethan smiled. "Because there aren't any memories here. No ghosts. No painful reminders. Just tonight." She nodded thoughtfully. "I like that." Dinner arrived a short time later. They talked about ordinary things. The children's summer art program. One of Ethan's mentees who had earned a college scholarship. Grandma Evelyn's newest peach cobbler recipe. Margaret Caldwell's flourishing rose garden. They laughed. They disagreed about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They shared dessert. Nothing extraordinary happened. And somehow, that made the evening extraordinary. Halfway through dinner, Maya quietly set down her fork. "Ethan." "Yes? Can I tell you something?" "Always." She smiled softly. "After Bellissimo, I thought that if we ever shared another meal, I'd spend the entire evening wondering whether your phone would ring." He listened carefully. "Tonight." She glanced toward the phone resting face up beside his plate. It hadn't buzzed once. "And if it had rung?" "I already know what you would have done." Ethan looked at the phone. "I would have let it wait." She shook her head gently. "No. You would have answered if it were important. And you would have told me exactly who it was." He smiled. "You're right. I would have." She reached across the table and gently covered his hand with hers. "That's the difference." The words filled Ethan with quiet gratitude, not because everything had been repaired, but because she could finally imagine trusting him again. After dinner, they decided to walk along the lake. The city lights reflected across the calm water. A gentle breeze carried the scent of summer flowers from nearby gardens. They eventually reached the same bench where months earlier they had shared the hardest conversation of their lives. This time, they sat much closer together. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" She nodded. "When I was 12, I watched my mother serve dinner to my father after she noticed lipstick on his shirt." Maya listened quietly. "I thought the lipstick destroyed my family." He looked toward the water. "I spent most of my life believing that." He turned back toward her. "But I was wrong." She waited. It wasn't the lipstick. It was the silence. The pretending. The belief that truth could wait until tomorrow. A tear slipped quietly down his cheek. "I carried that misunderstanding for 26 years. Maya gently squeezed his hand. "And what do you believe now?" He smiled through the emotion. "I believe love survives hard conversations. It doesn't survive hidden ones." For a long moment, neither spoke. The waves rolled gently against the shore. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. The sound reminded Ethan of another little boy. Scared, confused, standing in a hallway while watching the people he loved quietly drift apart. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw that frightened 12-year-old one last time. Then, with a peaceful smile, he silently let him go. Several months later, autumn returned to Chicago. The Community Arts Center celebrated its first anniversary. Children, who had once been shy, now performed confidently on stage. Families gathered for music, art, and neighborhood celebrations. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Ethan and Maya hosted a volunteer appreciation luncheon together. As everyone settled around long wooden tables beneath strings of outdoor lights, Ethan looked across at Maya. She caught his eye and smiled. No words were needed. After lunch, a young volunteer approached them. "You two seem really happy." Maya glanced at Ethan before answering. "We worked very hard to get here." The young woman smiled. "What's the secret?" Maya looked at Ethan. He nodded, inviting her to answer first. She smiled. "The truth," Ethan added quietly, "and the courage to tell it before fear tells a different story." They walked hand in hand through the art center as children's laughter echoed around them. The building Maya had designed had become exactly what her grandmother always hoped a home should be. A place where people didn't have to be afraid to come inside. Ethan realized something beautiful. Home had never been a mansion overlooking the city. Home wasn't wealth, or success, or reputation. Home was the place where no one had to hide. That evening, they prepared dinner together in Maya's kitchen. He chopped vegetables while she stirred the sauce. She laughed when he nearly dropped a wooden spoon. He laughed with her. When everything was ready, they carried their plates to the table. Ethan paused for just a moment before sitting down. Maya noticed. "What is it?" He looked around the room. Warm light. Fresh flowers in a vase. No hidden phone. No secret reservation. No second life waiting somewhere else. He smiled. "I was just thinking. What about? How grateful I am that this dinner is exactly where I said I'd be." Maya reached for his hand. "So am I." Outside, the first autumn leaves drifted quietly across the yard. Inside, two people who had once been separated by fear, silence, and one unforgettable lie, chose something different. Not perfection, not forgetting, but honesty every single day. And in the end, it wasn't the billionaire's fortune that saved his love story. It was the simple decision to stop hiding from the truth. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to hear from you. What part of Ethan and Maya's journey touched your heart the most? Was it the childhood memory that shaped Ethan's life, the heartbreaking dinner at Bellissimo, the difficult conversation by the lake, or the quiet ending that proved trust can be rebuilt one honest choice at a time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every comment, and your stories, opinions, and experiences make this community even more meaningful. If this story reminded you that honesty, accountability, and genuine love are still worth believing in, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable love story filled with powerful life lessons. And if you know someone who needs this message today, share this story with them. Sometimes, one story can open a conversation that changes a life. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until our next story, remember this: love isn't measured by the promises we make. It's measured by the truth we choose to live every single day. Stay safe, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.